At first, the feminine energy tends to increase a man's testosterone and arouses him. His heartbeat rises, his adrenaline rushes depending if there's male competition, and they get more competitive. Because when a man is in front of a feminine woman alone and there is no competition, it tends to lower their stress levels, especially if there's no competition, or if they are men that they perceive as no competition, their stress levels go lower because they don't feel the need to work too hard. But when there is competition, they experience a release of stress levels and a decreasing of testosterone, especially if they think the other men are more attractive than them. This physiological arousal causes them to release adrenaline. And what happens is that when you release adrenaline, some studies show that your peripheral vision naturally lessens at 30 degrees. Like your peripheral vision gets more narrowed. And this adrenaline not only narrows your peripheral vision, but it also affects men psychologically, where their psychology gets more constricted, which affects their decision making, and they become more irrational, which leads to them to prioritize the attention and the conquering of a woman over their needs. When a man sees a feminine woman, his amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for processing emotions, is activated, and then it releases neurotransmitters such as the dopamine and adrenaline, which is linked to excitement and pleasure. But at the same time, his prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, is temporarily inhibited. This naturally makes a man have a harder time making rational decision because he's more focused on the immediate pleasure at seeing that beautiful woman. So this naturally makes a man who makes good decisions, who is rational, do the complete opposite of what you normally would see, right? Initially, when you first meet a man, will have the most effect on him. They'll do more things for you. They'll treat you better. Why? Because their brain is flooded with so many neurotransmitters of pleasure. And naturally, when the amygdala is releasing those types of emotions, which is responsible for sexual arousal, they don't really, it's like a balance beam. If the amygdala is more stimulated, your prefrontal cortex, which is this, becomes less useful. But then when you're thinking more rationally, your amygdala is less stimulated, right? You just become more rational. And that's why meditation as a man is so important, because meditation strengthens your frontal cortex, which naturally makes you more, not immune, but you're able to think more clearly even when you're in front of a beautiful woman. So that's why a lot of the times when you as a woman, when you use your femininity, it doesn't have to make sense, right? It's like adornments, right? When you wear adornments, they don't have to make sense, right? But as long as it doesn't make sense, as long as it doesn't add up, it makes a man become more irrational. And you might think that's a bad thing. You might think that guys don't like that. But the truth is that they actually love feeling that irrationality, because the world where we live in, the man meant to be too rational. The man meant to be too logical. And so it's a muscle that gets tired after a while, and they want to let loose and make some bad decisions. It's similar to when you're in a diet and you have cheat days. You have cheat days not because of the positives in terms of increasing your metabolism, but also the psychological component. You're able to have some release. It's very tough. It adds things up. And so you release some of that pressure by having cheat days. It's the same thing with when you're in the thrill of chasing a beautiful woman. She becomes a vessel for you to act completely irrational. It's actually why people get drunk, why people get inebriated, why people like going to group events, because for a moment they're able to let go of their irrationality and have an excuse to act out on their irrational behaviors. That's why some people get into mobs and they start beating people up, and then they say, oh, it's because I was in the group. Or people who get drunk and cheat on their husbands or cheat on their wives, and they secretly wanted to do it, but they wanted to blame it on the alcohol, because it's intensely pleasurable to indulge in our animalistic desires, in our animalistic instincts to act without thinking. We get tired of always thinking, of always restricting ourselves. Sometimes the best part about temptation is not about being tempting and resisting, but being tempted and giving in to temptation. To let go of the rational exterior and act like a child. So it's extremely pleasurable. And that's why a lot of these guys will give women money money, will do things for women that they usually wouldn't do. They'll ruin their lives, all because of the feminine energy has a complete blinding effect on the man, and a type of effect that is soothing. And also, like I said, when you first see a woman, your testosterone rises up, right? And as a result, when the amygdala looks at a woman as well, it releases dopamine. So when you mix in testosterone with dopamine, when they both become like the dopamine becomes marinated by the testosterone. Literally, our dopamine carries testosterone with it, meaning that during sexual arousal in response to a woman's feminine energy, dopamine and testosterone are both released in the brain at the same time. That's what I mean by marinated or carrying it is. Not that dopamine carries testosterone, but that they both are released at the same time. Because dopamine is responsible for driving people to seek pleasurable experience. But then when that pleasurable experience is sex, then the testosterone is released because it's involved with sexual desire and arousal. So when that happens, it just makes a guy more competitive, right? And initially, when a man is first introduced to a woman and her femininity is experienced by the guy, psychologically, those types of guys will get more competitive. Now, to give you proof of this psychological component, there is a basketball joke that goes around that when a guy is playing basketball and his girlfriend's watching, they get more selfish, right? And that's one of the things, right? When a guy's with a woman, guys, one, tend to ignore men more, and two, they tend to get more selfish with other men, and they tend to be more generous with the woman. That's like one of the psychological effects. Like they start being more generous with their money, with their time, with their resources. Temporarily, at least, they start giving money to homeless people. But also, they get more competitive in their behavior. So we'll watch a video of a guy who did an experiment where he let guys play basketball without the women, and then brought in women to see what the difference is. And the difference is unbelievable. Watch this.
Well, I wanted to see how guys perform with girls watching and without them watching. You know, see if things get a little bit more intense or whatnot. So to fully pull the social experiment off, we played one game regular, which is where these highlights right now you're seeing are from. And as you can see, it's there's no real intensity going on. It's a lot of lackadaisical defense, and again, just look at this. Like, where's the defense at here? But it's fine, because we already know we have something that's gonna turn the runs up. At least that's what we hope happens, right? This bucket right here was the end of the first game, my team won. This is me sending a text to the girls saying the second game is about to start, and to pull up in like a minute or two. This is me going up to the girls saying you guys booked the gym for the wrong time. For social experiment purposes, of course. And as you can see, the guys got excited early.
In that moment, none of the guys are paying attention to any of their friends. Right now, they're focused exclusively on them. The reason why that is because there's something called your reticular activating system. Your reticular activating system is a part of your brain that focuses on what provides pleasure and what provides pain, which is what could kill you or what could promote your genes. And so your focus will be on who provides the most value, what food is most tasty, and in this case, the people that provide the most value are the women. So their focus is exclusively on them, and they interpret every guy as a threat. So that's why they tend to ignore the other guys.
Oh yeah, well, why does he have the ball?
Time, go! As you can see, things are starting to get really tense now. The game is 10-11. The other team has game point.
Sub! Take him out the game! All that dribbling, let's go!
Because testosterone is being released and adrenaline is being released, like I said, it narrows the scope of your peripheral vision, not only visually, but also psychologically. So those guys are ignoring their friends. And when you ignore people, you usually get more selfish, and they're also narrowing their vision to that ass people, okay? They're just looking at those curves. Their focus is just completely narrow, and that's why their attention is fixated. When a guy's really looking at you, he's really fixated on you. It's because it just means that they're really attracted. I know it makes obvious sense, but it's interesting seeing it from this perspective.
Oh, okay. Oh, rebound. Get that. Got his own rebound. Shot.
I mean, you can see they all started turning into LeBrons. They started dunking. They started playing defense. They just started playing more physical. And that's because that's the power of feminine energy. It makes men work harder. All of these things that you see being built, all of these guys who have crazy empires, it's because of this effect, people. They're trying to impress someone. feminine energy, it's like a performance enhancing drug to a guy. They even studies show that when women are around, guys lift more and they work out harder. So initially they'll try harder, they'll dress better, they'll try to impress you more, they'll become more romantic. But then once they get used to you, a lot of the times, just like any stimulation, the dopamine will lower and the testosterone will lower, right? So that's why I said, initially, if a woman's feminine energy has a psychological effect of arousing a man, making him more competitive. But over time, that same femininity will then heal a man, right? Because studies show that when men live and cohabit, when they have a cohabiting relationship with a woman, especially if the relationship is healthy, that's a caveat, they experience lower stress levels. The emotional support and companionship gives men a sense of stability and securities. And they also experience lower levels of cortisol. So it has a more relaxing effect, like almost like meditation does to the mind, right? It has a relaxing effect, and that's the feminine energy. The feminine energy is a relaxing energy, but initially it's arousing and then it relaxes you. And also studies show when a man is in a relationship with a woman, after a while his testosterone naturally gets lower, unless there are two things happening. One, he's physically active. He likes to play sports because doing physical activities naturally increases testosterone. And two, it depends on the baseline level of the man's testosterone. Some men have a higher level of testosterone. And also, it depends on his status. If you have a higher status in life, if a man has power, it has been linked to higher testosterone, even though its correlation doesn't equal causation. But the point is that those factors will affect whether or not a man's ambition stays lower when he's with a woman. Now, the studies that counter that being with a woman lowers your testosterone and thus lowers your ambition, is that when a man has families and kids and he prioritizing keeping his family and kids safe, then his ambition will naturally arise because they value keeping and giving a good life to his family. But also it lowers a man's defenses, right? When you're with a woman and she's feminine, a man can feel safe to speak his mind. A man can feel safe to be himself. And also his lowering of his defenses also means that he's more susceptible to your influence. You can make more suggestions. That's why women's power, before feminism came, a lot of times women's power didn't come from them controlling other men, but the women's power came from behind the scene. In other words, the pillow talk, where they're able to convince their man to do this or to do that in a soothing and indirect way. And so through a soft way of power, women were able to achieve power in life. Like Cleopatra, she was able to go from Mark Antony to some other guy, I forgot his name to be honest with you. But as you can see, the feminine way of power is indirect and it doesn't cause people to get defensive, which is a pretty smart thing to do. They value conquering the minds and hearts of others rather than conquering through brute strength, which creates resentment. So that's why you want to increase your feminine energy, because it's not just to attract men, but also to heal the man that you're with. It's not that you're not their mother, you're not their therapist, but your presence heals them. Just like a masculine man's presence makes you feel relaxed, makes you feel safe from other people, right? Especially if you live in a world especially if you live in a part of the world that's more dangerous, being with a masculine man is even more important. If you live in the United States, you could date Bob the feminist, but if you live in Mexico or India, you want to date a guy who's more masculine. You want to date a guy who's way more masculine. And the problem with super masculine men is that sometimes it can be toxic, right? But when you're in an environment where women are forced to select a guy who's more masculine simply because of safety concern, they don't want to date a skinny, like non-aggressive man. They have to pick a guy who is strong and aggressive and can sometimes turn on her. Unfortunately, you can see how through natural selection, they're just gonna start breeding guys who are just more aggressive. But it's a trade-off, right? It's like animals of herd, like herd animals like cattle or zebras. A lot of the times Zebras attack each other, right? They bite each other, they kick each other a lot. And so there's a lot of infighting among zebras. But the reason why they stay amongst each other is that even though they're getting their asses whooped by each other, if they leave, that means they're gonna get their ass eaten by hyenas. That means they're gonna get eaten by lions, right? So it's kind of like, I'd rather get kicked by you guys than see that other world where it's even more dangerous. So it's almost like they're picking between two evils. And also, feminine energy, studies have been shown that it increases a man's self-esteem, especially if you're not toxic. Like, that's the only caveat. You cannot be toxic. And the reason why it increases a man's self-esteem is because it validates them, it grounds them, it relaxes them. A lot of the times they stop trying to impress. Studies show that when a woman pays attention to a man, just you paying attention actually allows men to regulate their emotions better. And also, there have been for several studies that have explored the relationship between self-esteem and attention from women and violence. One study published in the journal of aggressive behavior found that men who received positive attention from women had lower levels of aggression compared to the men who did not receive attention from women. Another study published by the Psychology of Men and Masculinity found that men with higher levels of self-esteem were less likely to engage in violent behavior. And also, studies show that it's one thing to embarrass a man in front of other men, but usually men become more violent when they get embarrassed in front of other women. They don't mind being made fun of by other men, but when they're made fun of by groups of women, they usually retaliate. Studies have shown they tend to retaliate with violence. So studies show that men in towns where there's a high propensity of single men tend to have a high crime rate. Towns that have a propensity for men to be more married, like where there's more married people, have lower crime rate. Not that that's correlation, it doesn't equal causation, but that's a very interesting thought. Now, this thing tends to also go against the woman, because what initially attracted you is what sometimes pushes you away, which is their desire to find a mate makes them more attractive. Once they find a mate, a lot of the times they get more relaxed. They start gaining weight, they stop looking at the way they used to, they stop being romantic, and so they stop trying to seduce you on a daily basis. And that's why you were there. And that's why it's important as a woman to keep a man in a sexually competitive state from time to time. Because when you keep a man in a sexually competitive state, it keeps him working. It raises his testosterone a little bit from time to time so that they can compete more for you, so that they know that one day that your love is not conditional, that you have to treat me a certain way. You gotta stop giving men unconditional love. And look, don't get me wrong, like I know that when you marry someone, you have to, but also there's a certain fine line where where the guy tends to take you for granted because you're always there. So to increase your feminine energy, what you want to do, because by increasing your feminine energy, you can have more of this effect on a guy. You can have more influence. A guy will respect you more. A guy will value you more. He'll feel more of a need to protect you. You develop that to developing a meditation practice. It's as simple as that, people. You don't need to do backflips, spinneroonies, front wheels, cartwheels. You don't need to do nothing like that. Just start meditating, and you will develop a presence that's soothing. The more I meditate, the more I notice people are more relaxed around me, right? It's just as simple as that. If you want to learn how to do that, you guys can pre-order my course, Emotional Mastery. It's about how to use meditation as a practice for all of your life. Like it'll help you change from different attachment styles. It'll open you up more. It'll release your feminine energy. And it's a course that I have, but I'm not gonna talk too much about it. You can wait to the end where I give you a link where you can watch the video where I explain all of my courses that you guys can purchase. So we're having a seminar in London. It's about how to develop charisma. It's at the end of July. So click on the description down below where it says purchase tickets, because we're gonna have, I don't know how many we're gonna have, but it's gonna be less than 30. And also, if you guys want to purchase any of my courses or work with me one-on-one, watch the videos on the description down below where I give you guys more information on how to contact me or how to purchase my courses. I hope you guys enjoyed this video.